Okay, so I will be talking about Louis Armstrong and kind of a biography of his life. So he was born in New Orleans, Louisiana on August 4th in 1901. And, his career broke through in the early 1920s after working low paying jobs in the South and finally moving to New York to the red light district. And he's well known for his kind of unique sense of sound with both his vocals and the trumpet. So basically, Armstrong lived kind of a rough childhood. I kind of went over this in the timeline itself, but I kind of wanted to go more in depth. He lived kind of a rough childhood. His mom turned to a form of prostitution to get money for the family. His father was never in the picture, and his grandmother kind of was the last resort to take care of him. And in about the fifth grade, Armstrong had to drop out of school and he had to find a low paying job so that he could pay for his family and his grandmother and his mother. So after that, in 1912, Armstrong was caught by the police firing his stepfather's gun on New Year's Eve, and he was arrested for this and then sentenced to a boys' school. And at this boys' school, we see Armstrong's interest in music start to flare up. He starts to be really interested in reading music, performances, plays, and his passion for the trumpet is found during this time. After this, he's released from the boys' school and he does have to work low paying jobs to continue to pay for himself as he's an adult now. But, during this time when he was in New York, not New York, pardon me, in the South, he had this mentor who always encouraged him, persevered him, and really wanted his career to take off. And so after this, in 1918, Armstrong finally had enough money, had enough sources to quit his low-paying jobs and start to pursue his career in music. He worked on riverboats, he worked at funerals, lots of different events in Louisiana, and he finally was offered a position to go to Chicago. He accepted, he went, and then finally he went to New York to the red light district, and this is where we see him come into play in Harlem. So he was really known to be very unique for his blues, jazz type of music. He was really passionate about playing the trumpet as well as his unique vocals. From 1925 to 1928, his career was just soaring. He released about 60 records during this time, and he opened kind of a new eye to the jazz world. His type of jazz isn't necessarily blues, it is called Dixieland jazz, which is kind of the swingy jazz, and many people who worked on Broadway really appreciated Armstrong's work and his art, so they offered him to come play in their orchestras on Broadway and also sing in their musicals and performances on Broadway. He was really go, 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 up until he had a heart attack in 1950. He performed several tours all over the world. He actually had a heart attack in Italy. And after this, he did not let this deter him. He got right back up, 300 shows out of 365 days in a year until the late 1960s. During this time, his health did eventually catch up to him. He had been working so hard for the entirety of his life. He had been on Broadway. He had been in Chicago, New York, Louisiana, and finally, he started to develop kidney and heart troubles, which could lead to heart and kidney failure. He performed a few more times, usually in an ensemble. One of his most important ensembles in his later years was in Las Vegas. And this is kind of the last time that we really see Armstrong out and about performing music. And then he finally does die in his sleep in his New York home in 1971. So I firmly believe that Louis Armstrong was a very influential person during the Harlem Renaissance because of his sense of, Black enrichment in his music and as well as through theater. And what I mean by this is during this time, the Harlem Renaissance was all about the enrichment and really discovering the culture of African American people and their Black lives, what they do every day. And this wasn't necessarily just for Black people. For Black people, this was for a whole wider expansion of people. Broadway producers. Armstrong influenced not only African American Black musicians, young and old, but everyone in general. The Harlem Renaissance was all about the appreciation for the African American, the Black arts, the literature, the enrichment, and his contribution to the music in this era was not only appreciated then. His legacy lets us continue to appreciate this community, this lifestyle, and his work even today. And so, kind of an expansion of his medium of art. He was best known for ensemble jazz with occasional solos, his vocal talents, trumpet and horn playing, Dixieland jazz. Like I said, it is known as hot jazz or swing jazz, which was originally originated in New Orleans. Makes sense because he was from there, and he was really, really known for swing jazz as well.